Hey everybody!
Hi everybody and welcome to the Sensitivity Relief Workshop. We are going live just a couple minutes early to make sure that everybody can find this page as well as make sure technology is working and whatnot.
Yes, so real quick on that note, just so everyone's aware, not to interrupt, but this, just to get a few technology things straight, this live every day at noon Eastern time, join the group. It will be pinned to the featured section. So if you don't see it there and it is noon Eastern time, refresh your page or come back to it and you will see it pinned there and saved. And just wanted to get that out there for you. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like we've got some viewers hopping on. As you're hopping on, please say hello in the comment section below. Let us know where you're watching from. We like to see where everybody's coming from. We also want to make sure that you're able to see this and that the comments are coming through and everything is working correctly. Hey Becky, nice to see you here.
Awesome.
We have a repeat person here with us. We know who Becky is, so glad to see you here. Hey Talitha, Arkansas, very nice.
Yeah.
We drove through there last spring, I believe.
Yep.
Beautiful.
I think we went to see Johnny Cash's home site.
Hello, Cheyenne, Minnesota. We grew up from Iowa, so
Yeah.
very close to Minnesota, very familiar with Minnesota. And Lori's from Florida. Glad to have you all here. So once again, say hello as you're hopping on. Now,
All right, cool.
a lot of you are looking for the workbook still. Sorry for the confusion. I know it's kind of been a little bit of confusing getting that to you guys. So just know that it is under the guides tab at the top of the group. So there's 3 lines at the top left corner of the group. You click those 3 lines and you click on guides and the workbook is right under there.
Right.
So if you've struggled to get it, make sure you have that downloaded, printed out, fill in the answers. That's really for your own use.
Yes.
All right. So
yeah,
lots of
again,
people
just
hopping
one
on.
thing to stress again, a couple of things to note. We're going to we'll say this a couple of times when we first start out, but join this group at noon Eastern time. Pin this, save this, be sure to join. And if you're watching this replay, totally fine as well. Their replays are available for the duration of the workshop, but the featured section, the very top of the group, when you click in this group, you will see this thing pinned live. Brooke and Hannah will be live. If you don't see it in the newsfeed or don't see it there, refresh the page. It will populate. We want to be sure everyone's finding it. We don't want you to be not joining because you can't find it. It's totally there. It's there every time. So,
yeah, Jennifer Swanson is from Central Iowa. Where in Central Iowa? Because that's
Yeah.
where we grew up. I grew up in Ellsworth, Iowa, which is a small town right north of Ames.
And I'll represent Grafton, Iowa. So Clear Lake, Iowa,
Yeah.
basically.
All right. Well, there's
But
people
now we're
from
in South Florida. Yep, we're down
Yeah.
here, and it's awesome.
sunny South Florida, which is amazing, and it's great to see people are joining from all over.
So it's just an FYI too, if you see us looking down here, it's because that's where the comments are at. Because
Yeah.
we have a lot of content to cover, which we're going to go over here shortly. We'll give you kind of more ins and outs of what to expect this week in the next 9 days. But we try to stick with all the trainings. There's a lot of information to cover, but if you have questions and stuff as it comes up, if we happen to glance down and it relates to this topic or it's something we could, we'll be sure to answer it for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Post questions in the comments because if we don't answer them live, we will be looking at the comments and try to answer them in the comments section afterwards. So we'll get into it. So who's excited to spend this week with us here in the Facebook group? Put a happy emoji below. Let's get some positive energy going here.
Yeah.
So if you don't know us, I'm Brooklyn Hannah, your host, and
I'm Nick Hannah, your other host.
And we've been looking forward to this week for a very long time. We're super excited to walk you through the content and show you how to use brain retraining to reverse your chronic symptoms. I know this is called a sensitivity relief workshop. However, if you have any chronic symptom of any sort, whether it's just one or you have 27 like I did, then this is for you. So if you don't even have sensitivities, this is also for you. Whether you have sleep issues, brain fog, digestive issues, fatigue, this can really work and help for all kinds of symptoms.
Yep. Totally.
So it's important to understand that each day builds on the next. So be sure to watch all 5 days in order. And so if you're watching the replay, go back and watch day 1. Watch this one first and then go in order. And so also it's important to understand that this is a 5-day workshop. However, there are 4 bonus days, so it's really like a 9-day workshop. So we are going live every day at noon Eastern until next Tuesday. And so we won't be going live on Sunday, but every other day other than that, we will be here.
Yep, and we're going to teach you a lot of things, right? How to use. We're going to teach you, the power of your brain, your mind, and how that in a relationship with Christ can help really calm this stress response that is happening in your body right now. Our promise to everybody here is that you'll walk away with practical brain rewiring tools so that you can start to live and get back to that happy and healthy life. And we don't believe that anyone here should be limited in any way. Okay, and rewiring your brain and these concepts and these techniques and everything we're going to discuss and more will take longer than 5 days. Right, so take all that pressure off yourself. Just going into this, but this isn't going to be an amazing start that you can start implementing like the practical tools that we're going to share to rewire your brain and renew your mind for Christ. So we're going to teach you a lot of things, like what caused your symptoms and sensitivities to begin with, so you don't have to keep on searching for answers as to why you're sick. We're going to go over the fight, flight, freeze stress response, which again, that it's happening within your body, like we said, and how how it's affecting you, and how you can quickly get out of it with some of our techniques. And we're also going to talk about how you can be really important topic, how to become aware of these unhealthy thinking patterns, these thoughts, these neural networks that are in your brain, certain triggers that are keeping you in this inflammatory state, in this hypersensitive state. And we're also going to go over, how you can naturally boost neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and things like that. So
yes, but
a lot of good stuff.
We do need a full commitment from you. So if you're ready to learn all of this and you plan to watch all of the videos, put on a scale of 1 to 10 how committed you are. 10 being super committed. So we love action takers because we know that those who show up and do the work are the ones who get the results. And so if you have questions throughout, we're here to answer all of them. Please post questions in the group, on our videos, and our posts. And also, you should have a message from a member on our team. So be sure to check your message request folder on Facebook. We don't want you getting stuck. You should have a message from Jenny, Cheyenne, Shia, or Natalie, and we are all here to help you this week.
That's right, and since we like action takers, we do want to offer a prize for those who have been taking action. So we're going to be giving away a chance to win our 6-month Limbic System Rewire group coaching program. So to get involved or entered into that, you must comment on all the homework posts every day. Again, those homework posts will be posted after the live trainings. They'll be pinned in the featured section and saved in the guides tab. So comment your answers and also engage now through this process during the live videos, lots, right? And you do not have to be live to...
Yeah, I've got the question a few times. Do I have to be live in order to win that prize? You do not.
No.
You just basically have to comment on all the homework posts to be entered. Yep. By Thursday.
And exactly. And then just one other quick thing too, like I know if you're just joining us live now or whatever, Facebook and their algorithms, they don't like to send notifications all the time. So don't get discouraged if you're just joining now, or if you're watching the replay or you intended on watching it, couldn't find this, again, join the group. It's pinned to the featured section every single time. But one other thing to mention too, you should have a workbook for this week. And she touched on it earlier, but if you haven't downloaded it yet, pretty easy. Go to the guides tab, top of the group. And if you're on a mobile phone, it's going to be it looks like a hamburger. There's hashtags in the upper left-hand side.
3 lines.
Yeah, 3 lines. You'll click on it, download it to your smartphone or computer because you can type right into it. Everything's in that. We're following that content, so follow along. And the trainings, again, including the bonus days, we're going to be live here in this group, noon Eastern time. And all of those videos, all these trainings are going to be available through the duration of the workshop. Right? So they're going to be taken down next Tuesday, which is why we want you to stay committed and watch these replays as they come out because it can add up to be a lot. And again, they'll be under the guides tab through the duration of the workshop, and summaries will also be posted there.
I was also going to say, if you want to invite your friends and family, we're also doing a giveaway for that. So for every person you invite, you get your name into a drawing to win a $100 Amazon gift card. And all you have to do to invite them is invite them to this group or have them sign up at limbicsystemrewire.com/sensitivity workshop.
Yeah, and the workbook, you must save it to your computer in order to, if you're typing in it and you want to save it, have it saved to your computer because then it's just like any other document or file. And then one other quick disclaimer just as well, Brooklyn and myself, we are not doctors. We don't treat or diagnose diseases or anything like that. So before you make any changes to any diets or supplements or medications or anything like that, talk with the provider or doctor who's doing that. This is for educational purposes, but it's amazing information. So,
so before we get started, I will talk a little bit about who I am. I'm Brooklyn Hannah, as I mentioned. I'm a registered nurse, and I used to be a functional health practitioner. But I've now fully transitioned into brain rewiring coaching. So, right after I went through nursing school, I moved into this very moldy apartment and I got hit with over 20 symptoms very quickly. I was to the point where I was only eating 2 foods, I was reacting to mold, EMF, chemicals, had all the symptoms between brain fog, fatigue, digestive issues, insomnia, you name it, I had it. And so basically, I rode the struggle bus for a while. I first went to like 30 different doctors. I saw naturopaths, different specialists, and I went through dozens of protocols, but I still had multiple lingering symptoms. So, along with that came a lot of frustration. So, I had all the functional diagnoses as well: Lyme, mold, SIBO, mast cell. Like I said, you name it, I had it, it seemed like. And so at that point, I even became my own functional practitioner so I could run the best labs on myself, so I could give myself the best supplement protocols. As I mentioned, I still had symptoms. Super frustrating. Then God led me to brain retraining and neuroplasticity, and I started studying it like crazy. I started implementing it with my current clients. I was doing the functional health coaching with, I was doing all the diets, the labs, the supplements, all of that with my clients as well. And I quickly found that brain rewiring was the missing piece of the puzzle for both my clients and myself. And really, my clients, their results skyrocketed when I started implementing brain retraining. It was literally amazing. And for myself, I reversed all sensitivities, well over dozens of symptoms with brain retraining alone. I was able to get off all my supplements, medications, or protocols. I haven't had to run another functional lab test myself in years. And so I'm completely free of so many symptoms. I can eat what I want, go where I want, and there's no limitations, there's no restrictions, and so I'm free. And so here I am today to give you the hope that you don't have to live like this anymore. So I don't believe anyone has to live a super limited lifestyle where you have to live in the bubble of avoidance, avoiding electronics and foods and social situations and buildings, whatever it is. And that by addressing this fight, flight, or freeze stress response we're going to talk about, I believe tomorrow, that you can relieve these sensitivities and begin to live a normal life. So just know that's around the corner for many of you guys if you implement some of these tools that we teach you.
Yeah, because it's given hope for a lot of people. We, again, want you too to believe that you can reverse your chronic symptoms and these sensitivities fully. It is possible. With this stress response, with an impaired limbic system, your nervous system basically is in this hypersensitive state, and it can stress out and over, go out of balance and have all these things happen just about everything. A little bit of EMF, maybe a little bit of mold in the building, or a little bit of processed foods, or even conversations with other people. Bright lights, sounds, things like that. It's all like, if that's happening to you, it's not normal. Obviously, that's because of that heightened stress response. But again, these things aren't life-threatening, and when they're in low to moderate amounts, right? Or if they were, everybody would be sick. It's because it's just how it is. You have to rewire the brain to stop that trigger, stop that process, so that way your brain gets out of that hypersensitive state and stops seeing everything around you as a threat. So we're not telling you, again, this is there's always extremes to this. We're not telling you to go live under a cell phone tower or live in a house covered with mold or eat fast food all the time. There's a balance, right? We're simply saying that you should be able to go into the buildings, and you should be able, without having to mold test every single one. You should be able to be around cell phones. You should be able to, have a treat, whether it's pizza, ice cream, burger, fries, whatever, if that's your choice. On occasion, if you feel like that, right? If that's your desire, of course. Most of you ask yourself this question: were you able to do these things at some point, right? Likely that was the case. If that's your goal, then why can't you get back there, right? Mm-hmm. And I will say for her too, I've seen her go through this entire process from beginning to end. It's been from, she was high functioning, to bedbound, isolated, full of symptoms. Hopelessness was big time, and going out living your life happy and healthy with a purpose again. And although I've personally not been chronically sick at this point, but I do use the techniques in this program and in this process personally for other things, right? Bad habits, sin, worry, fear, so on, right? And behind the scenes, everyone must know this and remember, there is a war happening right now, spiritual warfare going on between God and Satan. That battle takes place for us right here in the mind, right? So if any family member living with you wants to jump in on this or take the workshop, or if you think, someone could benefit from this, please have them join, right? Just send them the link to this group and have them join. We believe it's neuroplasticity, brain rewiring, mind renewal is a gift from God that everybody should use, again, to renew your mind for Christ every day. And this is not just a quick, I'm going to do this to get done. It's a lifestyle and a heart change, not just an exercise that you're doing all the time.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about really what it is. So first off, what is brain rewiring and neuroplasticity? So it was often thought that the brain became fixed after a certain point in childhood. You couldn't change it, and how you functioned was permanently ingrained with no opportunity for changes. It's now known that this is not the case. You do not have to stay stuck in your current state. So there's the hope. So with rewiring your brain, you can calm your stress response and reverse your symptoms. This is called neuroplasticity.
Yep.
Pretty much the brain's ability to change. So this is in your workbook. Neuroplasticity refers to your brain's ability to adapt and change. So by changing the way you think with deep intellectual, purposeful thinking, you change the structure of your brain.
Yeah.
So let's just say right now you avoid certain things because you fear the symptoms returning, or the first thing you do when you have a symptom is go to Google it. Basically all these behaviors and thinking patterns and the way you react and respond and the way you may be you think like a sick person right now. This is just the way you've been wired, but you can wire all that out and calm the stress response and change the way you think and behave, which changes your life basically.
Yeah, and many of these thinking patterns or these beliefs, behaviors, and reactions, they've been, again, built into our brain for decades, some of them, right? They just really become the way that you think, the way you function. So like, for example, why do you, just ask yourself the question, why do you do the things you do? If you eat a certain way, is it because it became a habit and you believe that you need to eat that way? If, say, you're getting angry with your spouse and you yell right back, that's your wired response because you haven't changed that yet, and that's usually how you respond, right? It's like habits. This is how all of our behaviors and habits form. And right now, many of you wake up in the morning with symptoms, and your brain automatically goes into focusing on that, which can lead to unhealthy thinking patterns like oh, here we go again, my whole day is going to be ruined, or things like that, right? And it's tough. And our thoughts then lead to our emotions. So when you have these negative thinking patterns or unhealthy thinking patterns, it then causes you to feel these emotions of like hopelessness and depression, despair, things like that. It's just feeding the cycle. And for people who are stuck in this chronic stress response, these negative emotions can affect them negatively also with physical symptoms. That's why in our limbic system rewire program, focusing on more of the positive, like always following up something with the positive, right? You're trying to elevate those positive emotions instead of the negative ones. Because once a thought turns to an emotion, it can then affect your actions. We must become aware of it. So if you have a negative thought, for example, right, about your symptoms, you may start researching your symptoms, like about your illness, for a good chunk of the day, which then can activate that fight, flight, freeze stress response and cause more symptoms, right? And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Or maybe
that's how your thoughts can change into your behaviors, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, or maybe you avoid going outside because when you're sick because you believe you're too sick to do so, right? So those are all actions based upon what's going on. So it's easy, again, to put total focus on getting out of your trial and on your own instead of focusing on God and what he can do with you while you're in this trial, right? Oh, when I get better. No, right now is what we need to start changing it to. And the cycle, but the cycle will just continue until you break it by rewiring your brain, right? Just because this is the way your brain has responded to certain triggers in your life right now, or even up to this point, does not mean you can't change those thinking patterns, those emotions, and those actions for the better, regardless of your age. Don't even go there, right? It doesn't matter the age. Mind renewal is for everybody. And when we have these, but going back to these unhealthy thoughts, right? Those emotions and those actions, it literally causes a stress response inside your own body. And your body then will get a signal that you're stressed out, and it will secrete cortisol, norepinephrine, or adrenaline, those stress hormones. You've probably experienced this a lot yourself too, like going back to the argument with your spouse or a family member or a friend or whoever. You can literally feel your heart pounding, your mind racing, you have decreased concentration, you're more angry, you're quick to that, etc. Those things. And that's just one example of how your thoughts and how you perceive that conversation cause physical symptoms, right? That mind-body connection is very real. And with brain rewiring, you're going to learn how to identify all of your triggers, whether it's certain people, a certain thing your spouse says to you, or like a trial such as a symptom or symptoms you're experiencing, or a problem like finances, whatever it is, right? We're going to help you with that. But if you let the stress of these negative thoughts, unhealthy thoughts, get the best of you, they will then turn to negative emotions, unhealthy emotions, and the enemy will just feed that and continually have a heyday, with you. So
Yeah, so brain retraining is really all about moving on from past or current stressors or traumas. It's not really about talking about past traumas, working through them. I know other methodologies do that. It's about changing your brain's response to stress right now, wiring in healthier patterns, and moving on from stress and trauma. For instance, if you catch your brain reliving something negative in the past and you're caught up in a bunch of negative emotions like guilt, regret, I wish I wouldn't have done that type of thing, you'll recognize that and bring it back to the present moment, or use the exercise or some of the exercises we're going to teach you in this workshop. And so it doesn't mean you can't go talk to a counselor. If you need that, you can do that if need be. If you have a massive trauma like a death in the family, of course, it may be helpful to do something like that. But with brain retraining, we try not to stay there and relive the traumas, because the brain doesn't know the difference we'll talk about that later, I guess. We're going to talk about that in a second. So when we relive traumas and we stay stuck there talking about problems, this can have a negative effect on your limbic system and can really cause you to be in a heightened stress response and can make symptoms worse because of the mind-body connection. So it's not about denying your emotions or suppressing them. It's more about not letting them control your life, because like he said, the enemy will take advantage of these negative thoughts and these negative emotions if you let him. So now listen to this. This is what I was going to explain earlier. Your brain doesn't know the difference between just thinking about something or imagining something, or if it's actually happening. So if you're thinking about a past trauma, your brain starts reliving it and causes a stress response in your body, if you have chronic symptoms typically. So this leads to feelings of anxiousness, anger, or other negative emotions. And then what happens physically is your brain starts to secrete stress hormones such as cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline. And so, like I said, other approaches may have you work through the past and whatnot. This is much different. This is a forward-focused approach. So we can't change the past, and so we're not going to go digging up the past. We are just going to try to live a joyful life for Christ, because this is what helps us reverse chronic symptoms. And so, like I said, other approaches may have you working on that, but that's not what brain retraining is. So brain retraining is all about really boosting your emotional state, and the way you do that is to think on positive thoughts. And so you start to wire your mind for happiness and positivity and health and joy, ultimately rewiring your mind for Christ. Like I said, I was a functional health practitioner for 4 years, and what I discovered the missing link to be is that people don't realize that their own thoughts are creating as much of a stress response, if not more of a stress response, than the mold, the EMF, the food, the external environmental type stuff. So most people put their total focus on the physical body, as I did, but then in reality, we believe that our mind is much more important, as it really controls everything. And spiritual health is really key as well, and we're going to address that too. So if you aren't managing your mind, you're missing a huge piece of the puzzle to wellness. That's what we believe. And so if you're just letting your mind go unchecked, like most people do, you're likely letting stress hormones just flow throughout your body, your entire body, causing all types of damage, because downstream it basically affects all these different body organs, and it can cause chaos basically. So comment below, do you believe that sometimes your thoughts and how you perceive certain things can cause physical symptoms? I mean, what if instead when someone yelled at you, you reacted calmly and you said, that's okay, I'm calm right now. Maybe they're just going through a rough time, but I'm going to move on with my day. You wouldn't have dwelled on it, causing anger, and you would have prevented the symptoms of the racing heart, the decreased concentration, etc. Again, your mind controls everything, including the stress response, which can be responsible for physical symptoms through the mind-body connection. Now, I do want you guys to understand one thing. We are not saying this is in your head and that the symptoms aren't real, because they're absolutely real. But one of the ways you can reverse symptoms is by doing mind type work and also spiritual work. And that is what we're talking about.
Exactly.
We're also not saying that this is your fault or anything like that, and you got yourself here by the way you've thought throughout your life, because we know that God can allow a physical trial at any time. It's not just because you did something.
Right.
We will talk about how we believe the root of chronic symptoms can be related to sin, can be related to negative thinking and trauma and stress. However, don't take that as it's my fault.
Right. Exactly. So back to it though, when you begin to become aware of your thoughts and your emotions, you're raising your level of awareness, and with this comes the opportunity then to change how we respond to certain situations, which is rewiring of the brain, right? And the more you practice a certain way of thinking and doing, behaviors, the more consistent it will become until it's eventually your new default response, how you reply to respond to things. So when you repeat this thought, or a thought, a behavior, or a pattern of any kind, your brain will begin to recognize that and it will start to rewire itself through the strengthening of certain neural pathways tied to that interaction, that decision, or emotions, all combined. And this goes for any type of behavior. When you're stressed out, for example, if you burst out in anger again towards someone or isolate from other people, you're going to keep doing that likely in the future. Then it just becomes your wired response, coping mechanism. But again, that can be negative because we're not trying to respond that way if it's actually feeding your stress response. So if you rewire your brain in those situations to say, go towards people and talk with them, open the Bible, or do an exercise or something that calms your nervous system when you have that unhealthy thought or that when you feel stressed out, eventually this becomes your new default response. And over time, again, you get this trend here probably, in doing this, it reverses these chronic symptoms and sensitivities of all sorts, because you stop signaling to your brain that you're stressed or that this is a threat, and vice versa. So our brains are literally constantly changing and adapting to our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. We have the power to literally change physical properties of the brain through neuroplasticity. It's pretty cool. So we have that ability. And when you have the opposite, right, positive thoughts, they then turn to positive emotions such as joy and peace. And these positive emotions are very healing because they secrete the dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, those healthy neurotransmitters versus stress hormones continually. So the goal of brain rewiring is to feel the positive emotions as much as possible, which we can talk about how you can start doing that later on in the workshop. Hope that makes sense. So
yeah,
sure it does.
So yeah, for sure. So let's talk about this concept again because it's so important. So our brain doesn't know the difference between if we're just thinking about something or we're actually doing it, like a real life experience. So this is why dreams can seem so real. Or if you're watching a movie and it's an action scene or a scary movie, you may experience a racing heart and you might be on the edge of your seat because your brain is really seeing it all the same. Your brain thinks it's happening, like that scary guy's really in the room. And so if you're constantly thinking about your symptoms, how sick you are, how you're going to be like this forever, your brain basically starts to believe it. It starts to live in this trauma and create a stress response. And so that really goes for anything negative. When you focus on negative things and you live in these negative emotions of fear, stress, of anger, frustration, despair, hopelessness, right? Your body secretes stress hormones, like we mentioned, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, and these stress hormones are what's responsible for chronic symptoms. But instead, if we start thinking about positive things and we start to see a future full of hope, if we start to visualize ourselves being healthy and able to eat whole foods and being really close to God and going on runs, our brain starts to think that it's happening right now. It literally calms the stress response. And because those moments are so joyful, it basically causes the brain to secrete healing neurotransmitters. So here's an example of how your brain doesn't know the difference of you just thinking about something or imagining it. If someone yells, "There's a snake," as you're on a walking path, you automatically may go into fight or flight when you don't even know if the snake is actually there. Just the thought of the snake caused a stress response. Now, when we're talking about someone else who may not perceive it that way, someone else maybe didn't perceive it as scary, right? So let's just say Nick said, there's a snake, but I'm not scared of snakes. Then I wouldn't have been in fight or flight. I would have been like, cool, let me go see it, right? So it's all about, does your brain perceive it as a fear? It's not necessarily the trigger itself, but how you're perceiving it.
Right.
So
some people thrive under pressure, some people don't, right? Some people like that adrenaline rush, some people don't. Anyways.
So when you're perceiving something negatively and in fear, it's going to heighten that stress response.
Exactly.
So when you're constantly talking and thinking about illness and all the problems and trials in your life, it's like you're constantly being threatened by a snake on your walking path. Also, your limbic system is basically like a little kid. It listens to every thought you have, every word you speak, and everything you do. This kid believes everything you tell it. So with brain retraining, you're going to try to avoid using anything negative. Your language, your thoughts, your words, and your actions. And I must also say that the enemy can see everything you're doing. So if you are starting to talk fear-based talking like, I'm so afraid this happened to you, then the enemy can hear that and he knows he's got you, right? But if instead we talk out words like faith words like God's got this, God is with me, he knows what he's doing, I trust him, that kind of makes the enemy mad, right? And so we really don't want to give into language that pleases the enemy because he's listening as well. Not only is Limby listening, but also there's a spiritual realm there too.
Yeah. And he's been doing it for thousands of years, so he knows what he's doing. But so does God, obviously. Anyways, so when you set out to rewire your brain and think more like a happy and healthy person, it's very common to start seeing some physical changes because of, again, that mind-body, that brain-gut connection, and the power of neuroplasticity. Now, I'm going to pause here just for a brief moment. I'm not saying just think happy and you're going to get better, right? There's a lot more to that. There's a lot more of techniques and things we have to talk about. But just to kind of, but you will start to notice a better mood, right? This is a common thing we hear as people implement this. Start to see better mood, better sleep, better digestion, more mental clarity, things like that. Because our brains are pretty amazing, and we can use them. We should use them and can use them to start working for us, not against us. When we start changing our perspective, which is key there, changing your perspective and seeing your life through the lens filled with hope, with that eternal perspective. And
again, someone just asked, like, how does this differ from positive thinking? Obviously, the Christian life is not all roses. God does calamity and brings hardship and difficulty into our lives for our good. So it's more about changing our perspective on what's happening in our life. Yeah, you're right. Just because you become a Christian doesn't mean life is going to be perfect. Yep. So in other words, we have to train our brain to trust God through those hard times. And when we're talking about getting our health back, that actually calms the stress response and it can improve your health.
Yep.
So
there are things we can do in this process to help ourselves, right? Because because we do have responsibilities as a Christian. We are called to trust Him. We are called to turn from sins and be obedient, and all those wonderful things that the Bible tells us to do. Exactly. And if we look at this again from the Christian perspective, God also doesn't want us to sit and focus on our problems, complain about them, and want out of them. And I mean, of course, like someone just said, there's a reason for all of them. And there's a lot we can learn in the hard times. But, what He wants us to do is focus on Him. Like she just said, like Brooklyn just said, trust Him in the trial while we focus on our walk and deepening the relationship with Him through this process. Many things in life aren't learned unless it's through trials and pain, honestly. Pain of all kinds, right? Not just physical pain. I'm talking all kinds of pain.
And the point is to come closer to Christ, no matter what's going on in the world, as hard as that is.
So taking a brief pause here for a moment. What does everyone think of the training so far? Right? Pretty awesome that you have the ability to literally change your brain and calm a stress response by controlling your thoughts and emotions. So I want everyone to comment, like, is this new to you, or is this a refresher? I'm curious what everyone's comments are about that.
Yeah, let us know.
Because we have a lot to cover. We're just scratching the surface now, but just a brief break. I'd like to hear from everyone.
Melissa said, be content in all circumstances. That's absolutely right. It's really practicing contentment in Christ, not the fact that I feel better one day, I don't feel good this day. Is God bringing me a happy day? Is God bringing me a spouse or not? That's circumstantial happiness. That's external happiness, and we're trying to find joy in Christ. Yeah,
it's about detaching from the temporary circumstances and staying connected to God. That's where the true joy comes from. But here's something that's in your workbook, okay? So whatever we focus on becomes wired or gets wired into your brain. So if you focus on, for example, symptoms, your illness all day, engage with those negative emotions, your brains will be wired to think this way, right? If you have a habit of grabbing your phone and Googling symptoms every morning instead of going on a walk, reading a devotion, or calling a friend, whatever, then you'll be more likely to do that again. Over this week, the next week, at the end of the day, we encourage you to write down the top 3 things you focused on that day, right? Just for a reflection. Was it illness? Was it God? Was it work? Was it your pets, your kids, whatever? Like, what are you wiring into your brain, right? And if you're a believer, really think about whether these things matter for eternity or not, right? I'm not saying just, don't go to the extreme of, whatever. Like, there's always, we got to be responsible for ourselves and do things on this earth, but just the general concept. What does this matter in the long run? Are you trying to control your trial on your own? Or are you understanding what you should control and give the uncontrollable up to God, right? There's that fine balance you have to have.
And for this week during the workshop, we're also going to try to start wiring our brain away from illness and unhealthy thinking. And you're going to try to not talk or think about your symptoms as much as you can. Also, try not to really talk about anything negative, any fear-based negative thinking pattern. Maybe you're worried about finances, whatever it is. Try to not do that. And tomorrow we're going to go over 25 of the top unhealthy thinking patterns like rumination that you are going to start wiring out of your brain. I know this is tough, but really just do the best that you can. So here's an action step. Label your symptoms and diagnoses as an animal. So we want to create a positive association with them so we don't perceive them as a massive danger or so it doesn't basically trigger the stress response. For example, whenever you feel you need to mention symptoms to your friend or a family member, instead of saying, I'm so tired and my gut hurts, you'll say, well, I'm having some animals right now, but I'm doing good. It's a good day. I'm getting closer to Christ or whatever it is. Always say a positive afterwards. And so it's not that you have to visualize an animal or anything every time you get animals. It's basically just to keep you symptoms every time you get symptoms. It's basically just to keep you from going on and on about the animals all day, because I know it's common when someone asks, how are you feeling, to be like, and you list all your symptoms for a long time. We want to get our brains away from ruminating on the animals, on the trial.
Because brings up a good point. Now, one thing to know, because this question comes up a lot. What if I'm not feeling good? I feel like I'm lying to myself. Well, yeah, you acknowledge your symptoms, but you never say ignore them. We always say acknowledge your symptoms. We're never telling you to just, whatever, I'm good. But it's easy to focus on how are you doing to how we're, our brains are always trying to create associations, and it's easier to go to the negative, right? Especially if it's a wired thinking pattern or a way we think. So it's easy to go to physically how we feel. Well, there's other types of health: emotional health, mental health, spiritual health. People can be going through the same trial, and we'll talk about this in depth later, but the point is you're not lying to yourself. You acknowledge your symptoms, but you follow up, always trying to start wiring your brain to shift it towards this positive and detaching ourselves from these symptoms. It's psychologically doing a lot of things too. It's by calling it an animal versus, because our brains, again, have been wired to think a certain way. And this means if I have this symptom, it means these, typically in the past, if I have a headache, I'm going to have a headache the rest of the day. Then your brain will go there and it will start going down the emotions and the actions of having a headache all day. That's the point.
And then I want you to also realize that you can have a good day. You can be, even if you have symptoms. So you can have a good day in Christ. You don't have to have a bad day every day because you have a symptom, because let me tell you, almost everybody on this earth probably has a problem. So everybody could focus on the problem and say, my life is not good because my child is misbehaving, right? Everybody could find something to complain about, but we have to shift our focus to, I'm having a good day because Christ is on the throne and I'm going to heaven, if you're a believer, right? Find something good in your day. Right. Or because I have an amazing family, State something you're thankful for, because we all have a list of blessings, we all have a list of problems, but if we focus on the problems, then this life is going to seem miserable, right? Yeah. And so we're trying to change that.
Like in the Psalms, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
Mm-hmm. So remember that your limbic system is listening to everything you say. So you don't want to tell your brain that you're dealing with all of these things. So is the enemy. The enemy knows he's got you when you're sitting there in negative thinking patterns, moping or complaining. And I get it. It is bad. Like, I was really, really sick at one point. But when you do this, basically, your health gets better, which is really, really amazing. And so God is bigger than your problems. Really just get to a place where you give your trial, your suffering to Him while you focus on rewiring your brain and renewing your mind for Christ. Now remember, if you get a new symptom, a worsening symptom, go see your doctor. We're not telling you to ignore them and to not do that,
Right.
but acknowledge them. And we're asking you basically not to ruminate on them all day and to try to figure them all out. Many of you guys have been doing that for many years. And so...
And maybe you're not. Maybe you're quick to just be like, whatever, I'm over this. I'm just going to tolerate this pain. That's great. Now we can help start wiring in different things, right? So just know that. Like, there's both ends of the spectrum. And that doesn't mean, too, like, I'm a generally positive person. I'm still having symptoms, right? It's not, there's a lot to cover this week. It's not always related specifically to that, right? There's a lot of stressors, consciously, subconsciously that are happening. And some of them you may not even be aware of, okay? So just to set the record straight there, too. And again, that goes back to, God is sovereign. Everything happens in His control, right? So it doesn't take Him by surprise, right? There's a lot of things that, like, discipline, when you discipline your child because he's not behaving, or maybe he is, but you want to bring him through something, and him or her or something, and teach them, and it's tough on them and it's hard on them, and they might think, oh, what is going on? But in the long run, it's always to benefit you. God can use anything that it was intended for bad for good.
Yeah,
and
like
so
Rachel said,
that.
He can use it to help others. He can use it to make you more surrendered to Christ, so you are saved and you save other people. I mean, there's so many different reasons that God allows this in our life, and so we can use it for the good, unless perhaps we just sit in fear all day. Then,
which is what the enemy uses, right? But we know that. But yeah, anyways. So again, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead.
Yeah, so basically you're going to choose your own animal to call your symptoms. You can just call them animals if you want. And so really just try not to, the biggest thing is not chatting about your illness, because maybe you find people on the other Facebook groups and you sit there and you talk all day about it, or maybe it's your spouse, whatever it is. And if you do have to tell somebody something, like, that's okay. The point is not to just sit there and ruminate on it. So if you have to vent to a family member or tell them something new that's happening or whatever, give yourself a couple minutes and then choose a new, healthier neural pattern, a new pathway. So focus on something else that's going to improve your health and your life and bring you into a more positive emotional state. So if symptoms isn't the main thing that you're ruminating on in your mind, maybe it's something else. Maybe you're here because you just have anxiety, you don't have physical symptoms, but maybe you have a relationship issue, a financial issue, whatever it is. Label that as an animal and try not to talk, definitely try not to talk about it, and try not to think about it as well. So if you feel stuck in your head, go out and go on a walk, do something to take your focus outwards. And so for the homework today, basically all you're going to do is comment on the post what animal you labeled your symptoms as.
Now remember, just to comment, someone said animals are scary. What, anything else? The point is not to have it scary. So what is a non-scary animal to you? A dog, hopefully, or a cat, or I don't care, a butterfly.
Yeah, positive association.
Just in general. The point, don't get too caught up in it's really cool to see the answers because there's a lot of creativity with it. But the point is to just detach from, starts the rewiring process.
And if you really believe that all animals are scary, that's probably the way your brain is perceiving things in a fear-based perspective, then name it something else, dolls or something like that. Something that's not scary to you, babies, whatever.
Yeah.
So
it's to help us. Point is, it helps stop. It's a starting process it's the start of the rewiring process. The homework. Now, if you're commenting here, remember there'll be a homework post that you'll comment it on.
So if you want to be entered to win the 6-month group coaching program, you do have to comment on the homework post. Those are going to be under the guides tab at the top of the group. The top left corner of the group, there's 3 lines. You're going to hit guides, and that's where the homework post will be.
Yep.
So isn't this exciting that we have the ability to change our brains by changing the way we think and the way we act? And so comment an exciting emoji below if you're excited about this. Put some happy smiley faces. So taking the time to understand and rewire our brains can really help change our perspective on the world and really our role within it. So most importantly, it's going to strengthen your relationship with Christ, and there's nothing more important on this earth than that. So we can be more at peace, we can be happier, we can break old habits that no longer serve us, and really instead of being stuck in survival mode, we can choose to take care of our limbic system, to nurture our relationship with Christ, and we're going to talk a whole lot more about that.
Yeah, so now we're going to focus just for a moment about the limbic system itself. Don't get too caught up in with this, but the reason we go over this is because the The limbic system, which is basically parts of your brain, all made up of parts of your brain, is the control room to the body, right? So just briefly, we're going to talk about like the limbic system itself, what it is. It's a group of brain structures that are found deep beneath the cerebral cortex, and it controls things like our emotions, our memories, hormone regulation, and a lot more. And research has actually linked the limbic system to feelings of things like motivation, the fight or flight response, hunger, the production of hormones that help regulate your autonomic nervous system, and things like that. So real briefly, the 4 common structures. The amygdala. And what that is it's basically involved with the fear and anxiety. It responds to threats, and it also sends messages to the body to trigger stress hormones. Then it causes physical symptoms like fight or flight. So with limbic, when you're stuck in, or when you have limbic system dysfunction, or it's stressed or not functioning properly, this gets activated and it starts perceiving and seeing everything as a threat, right? That's part of it where it starts. The next is the hippocampus. It stores our memories, right? It connects emotions to our senses. So example of that would be, you may think of a past memory when you smell a certain thing, right? If I smell cut grass or fresh cut grass, I'm brought back to one of my first jobs as a kid, cutting lawn in the summertime, right? Another part of the limbic system is your hypothalamus, and this regulates our hormones, your body temperature, your thirst, your sleep-wake cycle, your sex drive, and a lot more. It responds to mental and emotional cues like pain and anger, and then it sends a signal to the pituitary to tell the adrenals to release stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. And lastly, the cingulate gyrus. This regulates pain and emotions, and it also plays a role in cognitive processes, focus, and attention. Right? So, I know there's a lot of science stuff, but basically, do you see how your limbic system literally regulates and controls everything? That's why when you have so many symptoms affecting so many different body, systems in the body, functions, organs, that's the connection. But the good news is you can bring all that back into balance with brain rewiring, right?
Yeah, so now that we've discussed some of those systems of the limbic system, we're going to move forward to how this limbic system dysfunction develops. So basically how chronic symptoms develop.
Yeah.
So this is in your workbook. Limbic system dysfunction can develop after someone has had multiple traumas and stressors during their lifetime.
That's key.
So it is not always necessarily the traumas or stressors themselves, but a lot of times it's the way that people perceive the trials, the traumas, and the stressors, and we're going to talk about that. So it's a chronic maladapted stress response that affects the brain and then the body. The common mistake that we see, and I experienced this myself actually, is that people got sick after one major stressor, such as, let's just say, mold exposure. That was one of my major stressors. And they think it's just the mold that made him sick, right? So they look for the best mold detox protocol and they kind of chase that for a long time. And then they find out it's all these other things. But I guess a lot of people believe it's all these external things. It's toxins, it's infections, it's parasites, it's SIBO, it's other toxins, it's Lyme, right? And it's typically not just one stressor, and it's typically not just external, right? It's not just the environment. For example, if mold was my only stressor, my only root cause, I would have gotten sick when I was living in a really old house when I was growing up. The house was 50 years old. I guarantee there was mold all over it, right? Instead, I got sick when I was in my lower 20s. Why? Well, I believe that my symptoms were caused by an accumulation of stressors throughout my life, not just external either. Yes, I believe mold affected my limbic system. I believe that these toxins and infections can have a negative impact. However, I don't believe it's just the only thing. And I really believe it was just kind of like the last thing that overflowed my toxic bucket, basically my stress bucket, I should say. So I now look at my life, especially right before I got sick, and I had a lot of stressors other than that. You know, I studied 16 hours a day in nursing school. I had a lot of I abused alcohol in college. I had eating disorders. There was a lot of things that I worked overnight as a nurse. Actually, I was a labor nurse. And I had a lot of unhealthy thinking patterns as I look back. So this is in the workbook. Usually there's a perfect storm of stressors, emotional, mental, environmental, physical, lifestyle, chemical, etc., that leads up to this limbic system dysfunction, or I should say chronic symptoms. So we believe that the common root cause of these chronic symptoms are going to be not only the external environmental, like the toxins, the infections that I talked about, and the foods you're eating and all this external stuff, but we believe it's the way you perceive stress, that it's perceived emotional traumas as well. It's many times it's sin as well. So when we look at what I believed led up to me being chronically ill, I said I abused alcohol, I said I had eating disorders, I had all these negative thinking patterns as well, sins. And so you can see how some of those were not just the environment, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah,
and so
there's a lot of things at play here. Yeah.
When your body has been through all the stressors it can handle, the limbic system basically goes out of balance, and it basically affects many different body functions. However, we believe, like I said, that one of the biggest stressors is how you perceive and respond to things that happen to you, the choices you make. Like I said, when I abused alcohol in college, that was also sin choices as well. And so basically you choose whether you engage in stressors or you create healthy habits. And you can create healthy neural pathways in your brain that can either prevent sickness or help keep you well. And so thoughts always precede our actions, right? I couldn't, what if I chose not to have an eating disorder or abuse alcohol or all those things, right? So I had a lot of poor choices. And at the root of that was negative, unhealthy thinking patterns, disconnection from God at times. I'm not saying this is the case for you guys, but just realizing how powerful our thoughts are and our choices, and that our thoughts always precede our actions, our emotions, and our choices. So even our emotions, if we're having a negative emotion, we're having negative thoughts. The two are connected always. And so if I would have had a healthier mindset, in my childhood, I likely would have saved a lot of pain. But this doesn't mean it's your fault. This doesn't mean we should feel guilty. God says don't feel guilty. If you've asked for forgiveness, you've repented and turned from your sins, I will forgive you. And really, God can allow a trial at any time. So you're not sick just because of all the things you did, right? God can allow a physical trial to someone who's been obedient and really surrendered Christian. So
again, for reasons beyond what we know, his ways are higher than ours, but a lot of things we can benefit from. That goes to the question about, like someone said, could that have happened by age 4? Daniela said. That's the point we're trying to make. It's not always that, right? But it's not always just your thoughts, right?
That's my point. Basically, there can be physical stressors, and I believe kids who have chronic symptoms, they may have had a mom that was stressed during a pregnancy. You can get this from your parents as well.
Yep.
And they could be stressed at a very young age from a physical standpoint. This doesn't mean that they were sinning at age 4 or anything like that. But if it does develop later in life, I have found that there is usually some emotional trauma, negative thinking, maybe some poor choices and stuff. And so it's really good to observe that in yourself and kind of change, on that level.
Yep.
So basically our point is that your own thoughts, your choices have a huge impact on the direction, the trajectory of your life. And the good news is basically the past is the past. Don't beat yourself up about that. Basically, we're just explaining how limbic system dysfunction can develop. And so really don't focus on those past stressors. That's only going to make it worse as you relive those traumas and whatnot. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here." So you can be made new today in Christ if you do have a past that you're not proud of, and many of us do. That's okay.
Yeah, so jumping forward now, so if the limbic system, your limbic system, right, stops functioning properly and optimally after multiple stressors, like she said, several bodily functions can go out of balance because of it, So some of the things that can go out of balance: your autonomic nervous system, sleep-wake cycle, hormonal system, your adrenals, like your stress hormone regulation, basically, your appetite and metabolism, which then can affect your weight, your emotional health, like anxiety, depression, mood instability, OCD, those things, right? Your immune system, well, I guess that's more of an emotional health thing, but yeah, your immune system can be affected, your nervous system, your gut health, and a lot more. So yeah, you heard that right. All these things that I just shared and many more can become affected if your limbic system becomes impaired as a result of stressors. Again, summing that whole thing up, she said, multiple trials, multiple stressors, problems, things come up in life. And in time, if you're not properly handling them, and if you get too much at once or too many things, your body just basically, like, you can't handle it and it gives up. And then when you're constantly in that stress response, all those systems that I just named can become affected, which is why you go down, I have leaky gut, right? Maybe you have that. I have Food sensitivities, I got to heal the gut. Well, then you do that and nothing happens. Oh, I got to balance my hormones. Oh, you do that, you got to keep doing that. You have to keep on doing these things just to manage those symptoms at best, which is why many of you are here probably. Like, I've been doing these things for a long time, yet I'm still sick. What's the deal? That's what we're explaining right now. So, the good news though, once you balance the limbic system, right, which we're talking about this week, all of these things can come back into balance, right? And I don't believe you necessarily always have to do all these detox protocols, all these balancing of hormones just before you get well, because this actually is at the root of the underlying cause, right? You're, like I mentioned earlier.
However you can,
Yeah.
if you're on supplements and everything,
Yeah.
that's totally fine. You can do this along with supplements.
Correct.
But don't think that's the only thing that will help your symptoms, because like I said, I explained my story, and when I started brain training, I went off all supplements, and this alone reversed many of my symptoms. And so dozens of symptoms for me.
Yeah.
So it's powerful alone, for sure.
Yeah. So just real quick comparison, right? I always like analogies. So if your limbic system is not functioning properly, and it's not if you have multiple symptoms that haven't been resolved over many years or several months. If it's impaired and you're trying to heal with supplements, diets, avoidance, it's like trying to drain the bathtub with the water still going, right? You'll keep filling up. Pretty easy concept, right? The same thing is true with your limbic system, and if it's impaired. If you have a stressed out limbic system, you'll have to keep on balancing your hormones. You have to keep avoiding these foods. You have to keep avoiding those stressors. You have to keep taking these supplements that may not even be providing you the relief as is, or maybe they are, but maybe it's just managing it. It's just symptom management, right? Or animal management, animal control, as I call it, right? This quickly can then turn into a lifestyle. And how many of you want to keep on the same protocols and the avoidance behaviors and things like that the rest of your life? If you do, then that's your choice. But if you don't, we don't believe that's a lifestyle. Our opinion. It's our opinion. We don't think it's sustainable. We think it's actually causing more harm than good if you're stressed in that response, stuck in that stress response long term. You can't avoid things. You can't avoid your way to health and taking all these different protocols, these things that aren't working. Like, a common misconception, real quick though, is that you must, like, we get this all the time. Do I have to wait on brain rewiring until after I've detoxed enough, or until after my hormones are balanced, or things like that? No, do it now alongside those protocols if you are, because that'll help that process. And like Brooklyn said, her and hundreds of other people we've helped have done it just from brain rewiring.
Yeah, so many times people, when they start with us, when they start working with us, or they start brain retraining, they're on a lot of supplements, but they find they're able to slowly taper off them because they have more energy. Their gut starts working. They don't have the constipation, right? So they're like, I don't need this anymore. They're able to slowly get off them, which is amazing. And I truly believe that's your doctor's goal too, right?
Totally.
Your doctor doesn't want you to be on these for life. He wants to take you off them too, and we've seen that. We've seen that a lot. And someone asked, how long did it take me? So I saw amazing results within the first 3 months or so. Like, within 6 months, I went from eating 2 foods to whatever whole foods I wanted. Within 8 months, I was eating whatever I wanted. But I had EMF sensitivities, mold sensitivities. I overcame all of that definitely within 3 to 4 months. That wasn't as bad as my food sensitivities. But I trained consistently for about 10 months. And now I just... I work on some of these tools are basically a lifestyle, right? Because we're always going to have the enemy throwing thoughts into our mind and whatnot. So some of these tools I practice as a lifestyle, as a Christian, and I believe everybody should. So you'll learn more about it, though.
Yeah, and again, going back to the protocols and stuff, again, they can be very beneficial, but sometimes they're just like, a Band-Aid on the broken bone, right? If your limbic system is impaired, that's why many doctors actually highly recommend this. And in fact, sometimes they can make people with limbic system dysfunction, though, like the protocols and stuff. They can actually make it worse because they're not able to tolerate them due to being hypersensitive. That was the case for her. Any supplements she took, she was 10 times worse because of it, right? Mm-hmm. And again, that's what we're going to be talking about here, about how we're getting away from that. But we believe that limbic system dysfunction is at the root cause of most chronic symptoms. And when you work to balance this by what we're talking about this week, the rewiring of the brain, these symptoms can then go away. Like, typically your adrenals, the hormones, the thyroid, etc., is all out of balance because your limbic system isn't working properly. Remember, your limbic system is all those parts of the brain that control everything. That's why. So if you don't adjust your limbic system, you may not get very far with your protocols. Maybe you will, but if you're here and you haven't, this is likely the answer. So as we mentioned, we believe that toxic and unhealthy thinking patterns and thoughts and triggers and choices and things are at the root of most chronic stress. And actually, in fact, this is a pretty mind-blowing study. Research has shown that stress affects around 92% of chronic illnesses. And that's talking all the big ones too. So there are also other stressors, of course, as well, like physical and environmental. And although things in the environment, again, can be harmful, they can be, obviously. But we believe that most people can tolerate them, right? That's why we have the immune system, your nervous system, all these systems in place, so that way you're not without getting chronic symptoms. Most people can go into any building they want and they're fine. Most people can eat, generally speaking, whatever they want and they're fine, right? We believe that a healthy limbic system, you should be able to eat a variety of foods, be able to tolerate and handle toxins and infections in this world without completely crashing. So if you're reacting to foods, chemicals, EMF, mold, whatever, we believe that limbic system dysfunction is likely playing a massive role in this, and that the brain rewiring would be like life-changing for reversing your symptoms. So if you're suffering from chronic symptoms at all, it is a chronic symptom or a symptom that persists long-term, months, then I believe, or years, I believe brain rewiring will help, hands down. And again, unless you get like an acute injury, acute things, broken arm, things like that, then I would start implementing what we're talking about here this week right away.
I actually believe that this can help anyone who's looking to get closer to Christ, right? Everybody deals with problems in this world, trials in this world. I believe pretty much everyone can benefit from something like this. Yeah. Absolutely. And also it can help whether you've been sick since you were 4, like someone mentioned on here, whether you've been sick a long time. I just want you to understand that everybody's brain is neuroplastic, which means it can change, which means it can get out of the chronic stress response, the limbic system impairment, and you can heal. And so no matter if you've been sick for 10 years or 20 years, no matter if you're old or young, no matter if you got symptoms when you were 2 years old or 27, it doesn't matter. The same process applies. And someone said, how long did I train for that year? I trained almost an hour every day with a specific exercise that we teach in our program, as well as like some of the other pillars that we teach throughout the day. And so lastly, we're going to brief on some common symptoms. So there's all kinds of symptoms related to being stuck with limbic system impairment. We also call it the fight, flight, or freeze response, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. But there's all kinds of symptoms: digestive issues, insomnia, chronic pain, brain fog, fatigue, sensitivities of all sorts, headaches, anxiety, depression. I mean, I can go on and on. So if you have long-term symptoms, you're in the right place, because brain retraining can get you out of it. The brain is neuroplastic. It can change. It doesn't matter how old you are or how many symptoms you have. People have different symptoms because they show up differently in everybody. So tomorrow, we are going to be here at noon, and we're going to talk about this fight, flight, or freeze stress response that many of you are stuck in, and we're going to help you also become aware of those negative thinking patterns that keep you in that stress response. It's going to be amazing. We can't wait to see you there. And don't forget to be entered into the drawing to win the 6-month program with Nick and I. Be sure to comment on the homework posts. Those are under the guides tab. Also, these videos are coming down next Tuesday, so be sure to watch all of them before they come down. Invite your friends to this group. Share the link with them. It's limbicsystemrewire.com/sensitivity workshop. We're so glad to have you here. And
one last thing, again, just reminder for everybody to find the live. Click in this group at noon Eastern time. You will see it pinned to the very top in the featured section. Okay, that's there every single day at noon Eastern time. If you don't find it, go back out, close Facebook app, open it up, and refresh it. And lastly, the guides tab, just to be clear for everybody, we've seen this multiple times. It is, if you're on your mobile phone, the very top left, you'll see 3 dashes. You'll click on that, it says guides. Second, and again, every video is saved in the featured section. And if you're on a desktop computer, it literally says guides right under the cover photo of this group. So that's just for, again, and if you're watching the replay at this point right now, comment replay. We'd like to know and just, work along with you and answer your questions. So comment replay as well. Like she said, they're available through the duration of the workshop. Each day builds off its own, so be sure that you're watching these, because it can get to be a lot of information, right? Today was more introduction and going over more of the science stuff, but now we're going to really dive in depth on what we can do about it. Okay.
Yeah, some of you are asking, like, how do I do it? Well, we first wanted to explain the science behind why you have to do this and what led up to your chronic symptoms, and we're going to give you some of our favorite tips. So stay tuned to the rest of the workshop. We can't wait to be here noon Eastern until next Tuesday. We still have 8 more days of training, so you guys are going to learn a lot, and we can't wait to help you.
Exactly. So we'll see everyone tomorrow. God bless and Godspeed.
God bless y'all.